All right, last video for the endocrine system, and this is going to be our catch-all video for everything else that doesn't really have a main role in terms of the endocrine system. So we'll talk about like the pineal gland and melatonin, we'll talk about the gonads with sex hormones, we'll talk about the thymus, we'll talk about all the secondary endocrine organs and what they do. And a lot of this comes down to the fact that we'll talk about some of these other organs like the gonads in greater detail when we get to their full body system. So like we'll talk more about gonads when we get to the reproductive system. We'll talk about the thymus more when we get to like immune system and lymphatic system. And then when it comes to all the other organs, we're just going to kind of touch on their secondary endocrine functions and then kind of go from there. So this is like our catch-all video for the everything else, right? So we're going to go a mile wide and an inch deep. We're going to start with the pineal gland. This is going to be found in the third ventricle. So we see it's like this little pea, right? This little tiny pea that we see in the back here, right? Kind of, or almost really center, right? Center and back in the brain, right? In that third ventricle. And it's going to secrete melatonin in response to darkness. So melatonin, if you've heard of it before, you've probably heard of it like thinking either in a previous class, or maybe you've heard of it when someone's like, I'm having trouble sleeping, I'm gonna go get some melatonin from like Target, right? So melatonin is a naturally produced hormone that helps you regulate your internal clock, right? What we call your circadian rhythm. And so melatonin, right, is going to, when you have higher amounts of it, is going to help make you feel sleepy. And less of that is going to prevent you from sleeping. So if you don't have enough light during the day, or if you, which would then increase your melatonin levels during the day, you have what's called SAD, and I know that's a horrible acronym, but seasonal affective disorder. And the therapy is literally light therapy. So you may have heard of people, especially people who live very up north, where in the winter it's dark for long stretches, right? There's very little light during the day, and people have these little lights that they turn on that simulate the sun to help break down that melatonin or bring down those melatonin levels. And of course you hear people who take melatonin before they go to bed, right, to try to help them sleep. And we'll talk a little bit about how the artificial light we're exposed to also affects this. So some light before bed is not problematic. You don't need to sit in absolute darkness to be able to sleep right, but excessive exposure to artificial light can affect your melatonin levels. There's a study that I remember, and there's some graphs, I don't have them here. There are some graphs that show the melatonin levels over the course of a night in like rats or mice, and you see that as the night continues and it's dark, melatonin levels continue to increase until the light is turned on. Whereas in the experimental group, a light is turned on midway through the night and you see melatonin levels drop when the light's on, and they never really truly reach their peak again, right, once the lights are turned off for the second half of the night. So this is one of those things where it comes down to sleep hygiene, not exposing yourself to tons of light, especially blue light, before wanting to go to bed, like toning down on how much light you are exposed to before you want to sleep, so that you can start seeing that increase in melatonin before you actually want to go to bed. Next is gonads. Gonads going to consist of ovaries or testes. These are going to produce your sex hormones. So with ovaries, they're going to be producing estrogens, progesterone, inhibin, and relaxin. Their whole job is to regulate the menstrual cycle, maintain pregnancy, also to prepare the mammary glands and other secondary sex characteristics. Inhibin is going to inhibit follicle stimulating hormone in the anterior pituitary, and then relaxin will help with birthing. I know relaxin, why would you name it that? Because if anything, birth sounds anything but. The testes will produce testosterone as well as inhibin too. So testosterone will regulate the production of sperm. It'll help maintain and develop the secondary sex characteristics in males. And then inhibin, same function, is going to inhibit follicle stimulating hormone from the anterior pituitary. again, we're not going to worry about any real details here. We have an entire time where we'll talk about reproductive systems, and we'll get into all the nitty gritty when we get there. The thymus is this little organ hanging out kind of just right in front of the heart, or just like above the heart, just behind the sternum. It looks kind of similar. I guess you could say it looks a little similar to the thyroid, but it's in your chest. This is going to produce thymic humoral factor, thymic factors, and thymopoietin, which are basically, the big thing you need to remember here with the thymus is it's going to help mature T cells when it comes to your immune system. And again, we'll get into more details when we get into immune and lymphatics. We're not going to worry about details now. Some other things that, or other organs, we'll kind of walk ourselves through this. The skin, right, is going to release hormones like cholecalciferol, which is going to help with calcitriol, which is going to be that active form of vitamin D. So your skin actually uses a hormone to convert in vitamin D into an active form that you can use using UV light. Your GI tract has gastrin, which will stimulate the release of gastric juice and the movement of your stomach muscles. Your glucose-dependent insulinotropic peptide, this is going to stimulate insulin release. Secretin is going to stimulate the secretion of pancreatic juice and bile for the digestive system. Then cholecystokinin, or CCK, will also help stimulate pancreatic juice secretion, bile release and secretion. And then lastly, it kind of makes you feel full after eating. Also why you want to eat at a decent pace, not too fast, so that you give yourself time for your CCK to make you feel full when you are. With the placenta, we have things like human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG. This is basically coming from or stimulating the corpus luteum in the ovary to keep producing estrogen and progesterone. This is to help maintain a pregnancy. This is also the basis for a pregnancy test. Estrogens and progesterone are coming from the placenta as well, again, to help maintain that pregnancy throughout that entire 9-month period and to prepare the mammary glands. And then human chorionic somatomammatropin, this is going to help prepare the mammary glands for lactation. With the kidneys, we see renin. We talked about renin a little bit when we talked about the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone pathway. So you'll want to know the pathway of those three in their role in maintaining blood pressure as well as blood volume. EPO, erythropoietin, which is going to basically stimulate the production of red blood cells. Calcitriol, again, vitamin D, that's activated so that you can absorb calcium from the food you eat, but also so that you can retain calcium from the urine. We already talked about a little bit, but with the heart, atrial natriuretic peptide, or atrial natriuretic hormone, ANH. This is going to help decrease your blood pressure by helping you get rid of sodium in the urine. It kind of works opposite of aldosterone. And then leptin, coming from adipose tissue, this is going to suppress your appetite. It may also deal with follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, but I'm only worried about one thing here, and that is suppressing the appetite. The last little group is the eicosanoids, such as prostaglandins. Prostaglandins, it's a very wide, very diverse group of hormones, but generally speaking, the thing they have in common, besides their structure for the most part, is that they work locally. Most of your cells are going to make these. They have a wide variety of activities, including your ability to sense pain. They can induce a fever and induce inflammation. So we typically are thinking of them with pain and like immune response, at least on a local level. Prostaglandins are the target for NSAIDs, or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So things like ibuprofen, acetaminophen, aspirin. So if we're thinking names, right, Tylenol, Aleve, right, those types of drugs, those types of medications, right, are going to inhibit prostaglandin synthesis. And so this is why they help with pain. This is why they can help you break a fever, and why they reduce inflammation, is they're targeting these prostaglandins that will allow you to feel pain, cause you to have a fever, and trigger inflammation. And so that's how an NSAID would work, why that's kind of one of the go-tos, right, for a lot of people when it comes to things that deal with like a mild pain, mild fever, and mild inflammation.